3, 2. Very excited for the first episode of the Art of Combat podcast in the beautiful Lady Jane's studios in Birmingham for Woodward Sports Network with the one, the only Dan the Beast Severn, UFC legend, UFC Hall of Famer, and all-around badass. How are you?
Well, you forgot all-around good guy as well. I only have to be a badass when it's time to be a badass. Otherwise, you have to be a good guy.
How are you? You doing good?
Good.
Good.
I'm killing it there, Art. I mean, it's you got the world has got all up and uproar over all this coronavirus crap, and you got people passing resolutions and laws and things of nature, and it's sheer stupidity and madness intertwined.
Well, I wanted to thank you because a couple months ago, I was out on my gig in Lansing, and I reached out to you just as a fan, and I said, hey, I'm trying to join the sports network. I don't know if it's going to happen. I'd love to sit down and do an interview with you. Just give me a chance. And you were nice enough to do it, and we ended up doing it in my car in an Applebee's parking lot in Howell. And now we've got the studio here at Lady Jane's and Woodward Sports. And so I thank you for giving me that opportunity and kind of opening the door when it comes to MMA interviews. I'm very gracious.
No, you're welcome on that. But also, you did have a little bit of leverage. Okay, not that my nephew was the leverage, but his mom, okay,
yes.
Well, my sister-in-law.
Yeah,
so
I had a little bit of family ties.
Yeah.
Just
there was a little bit of leverage there.
Yeah.
So yes,
but I appreciate it greatly, and obviously we've got a lot to talk about. Let's start right at the beginning with your UFC career. I mean, you're a UFC Hall of Famer, you're a UFC legend, and straight from Coldwater, correct?
No, I'm not. I'm not born and raised from Coldwater.
Well, in the Coldwater area, though.
No. Again, I'm from Montrose, Michigan.
Okay.
I'm a Michigander. Yes, I lived here my entire life up until going to college. So yes, I did my high school stint, stuff like that. But basically, I went to high school at Montrose Hill McCloy High School. I have owned a property in Coldwater since 1992.
Now, did the UFC bill you from being from Flint, Michigan? They billed you as Michigan?
No. It's always been Coldwater because I mean the reality is because I get a lot of my old high school classmates. They get mad all the time. They see all these interviews or when I was doing my heyday of the UFCs and working for all these other companies, and even working with WWF. Goes WWE. They will always say from Coldwater, Michigan, and all my again people I grew up there with stuff like that. You're not from Coldwater, Michigan. You're from Montrose, Michigan, and I go. But all they asked was, where do you live?
Yeah.
I mean, where do you currently live? And that's what I give them, your mailing address and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
we need to play like a Wikipedia fact or fiction one day because it says Coldwater, it says Flint, and then when I talked to you before. You're in the Howell area now, so you're but mainly a Michigander, true and true. Though I can at least say that, right?
Yes,
okay.
You can. I mean, I tell people think of Dan Severn as somewhat of a gypsy still because, and I've lived the lifestyle of a gypsy since probably my junior year in high school. I mean, as you can tell, I mean, can your viewers actually see me right now?
This is all pre-recorded, but they will see this. Yes.
Well, again, what I want to know is realize you see, I have my little office set up.
Yeah.
I've got my cell phone here. I've got my planner out.
Yeah.
I've got some notes that I'm taking and stuff like that because I have probably I tell people a dozen different jobs, so I'm recessionary proof because even though I might lose 2 or 3 jobs. I'm okay. I got another 9 to fall back on.
Right.
I'm okay.
You're always prepared.
Yes.
When we booked this interview, too, you had your planner out. I could hear the paper turning on the phone because you were setting a date. You're very organized.
I'm very organized, but I'm also very meticulous. And a lot of people find that unusual for a guy, first off, because guys most of the time tend to be slobs. And I always say, go in my room and you'll see bed's always made, things are picked up, stuff like that. Now, in my office, things are strewed about, but there's a organization to my madness. I have different piles of projects I'm working on because I don't ever do one thing. I'm always multitasking, and now I'm doing actually a lot more motivational type speaking. And the topic I go on to all the time is creating opportunities.
Right.
I'm great about creating opportunities, even though you and I have only talked about one thing there so far, the podcast, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Rest assured, before we're done, we'll have a few other opportunities that will be taking place.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of the UFC, I want to start there because obviously everyone knows your career in the UFC. You were in the early days when there was no weight classes.
During the NHB, which stood for No Holds Barred.
Yeah.
The phrase mixed martial arts, MMA, that only came about, I think, 95, 96, somewhere
because
there.
I think the debut for the UFC was 96, wasn't it?
No, actually, the UFC first began in 1994.
Right.
Actually, December 93, to be, if you really want to get technical, was the very first show of it. I always tell people that I bet my first profession was professional wrestling. As of the 1992 Olympics, I jumped into professional wrestling, and then by 1994, I jumped into a cage.
Yeah. Now, you're sort of known as like the first world-class wrestler for the UFC.
The guy.
But when it comes down to how much wrestling has progressed, it's still similar to the same formula when you look at fighters like Khabib, when you look at wrestlers even like GSP.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Even though I was the first world-class wrestler to step into, because I always tell people that being just a folk-style wrestler is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
My international experience, going to all the former Soviet bloc type countries, prepared me so well. Freestyle and Greco, and I tell most MMA competitors, you better know something about Greco wrestling, how to pummel, how to get that inside position, because that will save your bacon. You got to look at, I'm a stats guy. When you look at how matches are finished, 99.9% of all of these MMA matches will end up down on the ground.
Right.
And they're going to be finished one of three ways. The number one way is still ground and pound. Very barbaric, but so effective.
Yeah.
Ball up your fist much like a club and bludgeon your opponent somewhere around that head, neck, and face area. Number two is a chokehold. Number three is an armbar. I always tell people, don't believe me, look at the stats. That's what the stats say. So, because I coach this stuff, if these are the top three finishes, you better offensive moves, you better work on these as the top three. Defensive moves, you better have a counter to chokes, counters to arm and not let people ground and pound away. You better keep them nice and close. Don't give them that space to allow them to do that to you.
Well, when you think about it, I mean, MMA, mixed martial arts, it's not kickboxing, it's not boxing, it's not wrestling, it's all of those encompassed into one.
All of those above.
Yeah. So when you look at your debut as far as the UFC goes, was still tournament style. It was still three fights a night. And there was you
the
faced
same 2-hour pay-per-view that still plays today, where you face one opponent on a card.
Yeah.
And where they have all kinds of fill-in material now, because they go, well, let's go and see what Ken Shamrock was doing in his training or earlier today, or what did Khabib have to say about his opponent. They have lots of filler.
Right.
When the show first began, they did not have all this filler.
Right.
So
it was less production elements and more action.
Big time, because you have a match, all of a sudden it's like, boom, it's over in 30 seconds. Well, they've got 2 hours to fill. And in first match is over 30 seconds. They're like, oh, well, go to our website, buy our ball caps. There's some T-shirts. Did anyone see where that tooth flew out of that last opponent? Right? I mean, they were kind of lost.
Yeah.
But it now has progressed to, it's the beauty of, as time passes on, you iron out all the bugs.
Yeah. When you look back at the 90s and making your debut in the UFC, did you ever vision it being what it is today?
Yes. If it survived the political atmosphere, that's what I thought to myself, because I had originally had a VHS tape of the first couple shows that a friend of mine just brought to me and said, hey, you ought to think about doing this. Well, I happen to have that in, and a buddy of mine stopped by, just like real quick. I go, Dad, I just need to drop off. Well, I had this play in the background, and he just kind of catches it out of the corner of his eyes and goes, well, what's this?
Yeah.
And he was only supposed to be there for like less than 1 minute. Well, basically, an hour and a half later, he's sitting on the edge of my couch, jumping up and down because of all the action that's taking place. I'm watching him more than I'm watching what's the action is taking place. I'm thinking, there's something here. But then I know that Americans, as a society, somehow are drawn to violence.
Yes.
Most people are drawn to violence. Why do we always slow down when we're past an accident? Everyone wants to look over to see, probably hoping not to see something, but at the same token, they're still looking.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a combination of an accident, a crash, but people are drawn to violent sports.
Yeah.
Boxing has very big popular. American football. I have to say American football because if I say football, most of the rest of the world knows it as soccer, so I have to say American football.
Yeah. When you think about the span of your career and obviously where the UFC is now, it's completely different from like you said, no holds bars, no weight class. I mean, when you had your first match in the UFC, how much of a weight difference was it between you and your opponent?
Well, again, the biggest weight difference altogether has been just over 200 pounds.
Right.
Yeah, there was Manny Yarbrough was Manny Yarbrough was 500 pounds? 400 some odd pounds. And I think Keith Hackney only wasn't even quite 200 pounds. And so there's over a 200 pound weight difference.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest weight difference. So just like you said, no weight classes, no time periods. So it was unlimited. There was like one round until one of you were either unconscious, that could have been a knockout, a chokeout, or there used to be a ringside physician that was allowed to call the match. The referee was not allowed to end the match until I think UFC number 3. Mm-hmm. And Big John McCarthy is one that went to bat saying that, hey, I'm the closest guy there. I'm seeing what is happening. I could tell if a guy is conscious or unconscious. And I go, I have to wait for a doctor outside the ring that may not have that same angle that John's right there. He can see whatever angle he wants.
Yeah. Now, when you look at, you made your debut UFC 4, and then you ended the tournament with the loss to Royce Gracie through a submission hold. Mm-hmm. Did you think after UFC 4 that you were done? I mean, obviously, looking at your career, you weren't. But at that moment, were you like,
I got to stop right there because, just to correct you, you said as a loss to Royce Gracie. I go say, well, look at it as I gave him a gift. A lot of people, and this is one of the most controversial aspects of my career. They're like, "Oh, what do you mean?" I said, well, people said you tapped out. I go, "No, yes, I did." Well, then, did he beat you with? I go, that's your opinion. I go, there's only one guy that knows what went down in that cage, and that's me. I go, Royce doesn't even know what I did. But you got to realize I had been an amateur wrestler for 30 some odd years up to that point with lots of rules and regulations. Striking your opponent was never allowed. Striking your opponent was automatic disqualification. So I tell people that I was more torn with my conscience than I ever was with an opponent.
Yeah. So when you look at that loss and you call it a gift to Royce Gracie, you return at UFC 5 and you win the tournament. Yeah.
Well, again, I actually finally trained. See, that's where a lot of your listeners.
Because the last time that we talked, you went in depth into this. You said that you literally, it was like almost like hopping out the shower. I mean, you had.
Yeah, I had literally. I took 5 days, an hour and a half a day, and that was it.
Wow.
And I drove from Coal, Michigan, over to Lima, Ohio, because there were no cages to train in. There was only one cage. It was owned by the UFC. So the closest thing that could come to a cage was a professional wrestling ring.
Yeah.
And it was owned by Al Snow, a Body Slammers Gym in Lima, Ohio. So I went over there, and we basically had it set up with Al Snow and 2 other professionals and proteges that they had one old pair of boxing gloves, and they just kind of rotated. They were trying to punch, kick, and do whatever submissions they knew what to do. And I just stayed outside of range, closed distances, got into clinches, took them down. I used just amateur wrestling techniques, and basically, I didn't have to do them all legally because this is a no holds barred era. But a lot of people don't understand is wrestling is kind of like a legalized pain in the first place. Your opponent does not want it. You want to pin your opponent on his back.
Right.
He's not going to simply just roll over just because you're tickling him or something like this. You have to put on moves that you're putting him in leverages principles of leverage, and leverage equals pain.
Yeah.
So I had my opponent, my workout partners. They were actually screaming and squawking just from just the simple moves, and now I could turn these same amateur moves illegal. So UFC 4, I tell people I didn't train a single punch. I did not train a single submission hold, and look what I did.
Wow. Well, and it's crazy when you think about you were involved in UFC 4, UFC 5, UFC 6. I mean, that's 3 in a row. Pay-per-views, 3 in a row. You look at fighters now, if they fight 3 in a row, it doesn't happen. I mean, it's happened recently during the pandemic, but those are specific, kind of circumstances as to why that would happen.
Yeah,
when you were fighting 3 in a row, you barely had any time to recover before it was off to the next one, correct?
Well, again, you're just following the UFC.
Yeah.
I was working for. I was never exclusive to the UFC. Now, if you look at the contracts now, if you sign on with the UFC, that's the only company you get to work for.
Yeah.
You can't go to Bellator. You can't go to anybody else.
Right.
So I was not exclusive, so I could work for anybody. So
Yeah.
I was doing sometimes a match every other weekend.
And you had mentioned to me too in the last interview that we did, and I want to talk about this. Your record, it says on here, is 101-19, and you said no, that's incorrect because that doesn't include the X amount of time that I was doing matches that weren't recorded.
Yeah, when did Full Contact Fighter, just the different watchdogs of the industry, when did they come about? Not until 1, 2, 3 years after the fact, because they didn't know if this new fad was even going to last.
Yeah.
It was going to be outlawed because you did have Senator John McCain and that were trying to do away with the sport.
Yeah.
And it had to make the compromises it did, so more from being that no-holds-barred product into mixed martial arts.
When you look at your match at UFC 9, that was obviously somewhat of a hometown show for you because I was at Cobo Arena against Ken Shamrock, and you ended up winning that fight. And correct me if I'm wrong, split decision victory on that. Is that correct?
I don't.
Like, sure, sounds good. What was that experience like to fight in front of a crowd in Detroit at Cobo Arena?
Well, I'll tell you the thing that probably blew me away even more than art was that I never told my family members.
So the entire time you were fighting, up until UFC, they had no idea that you were participating?
No. I mean, even in UFC number 4, when I did my very first one, did I tell anybody? No.
Wow.
No, not even my wife.
Yeah.
I was already pursuing professional wrestling. I said, well, I'm going to go off and wrestle this weekend. I'll be back on Monday. But I went off to do a UFC event, UFC number 4.
Wow.
So I've got 2 uncles that happen to be catching that first UFC number 4, and they call over to my parents' home. My father's name is Marvin. My dad, who never answers the phone, happens to answer it that night. And my uncle's like, Marv, do you know where your boy's at? Well, first off, my dad says, well, which one? Because I have 4 other brothers. And my uncle's like, Danny. And my dad's like, well, isn't he down in Coldwater? My uncle's like, no, he's about to climb in this cage and he's about to do this, that. And my dad's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But after each match, my uncles would call back, okay, he won, he's okay. Well, he lost, but he's okay. And so when I finally got back home, I had a message to call your father.
Yeah.
And so at 37 years of age, my father is bitching me out for making him nervous. So it just goes to show you, it's a term of endearment. It don't matter how big and bad you think you are, you're still going to be either mama's little boy or daddy's little boy.
Yeah, but that hometown show and technically being a Michigander happening at Cobo Arena.
Yes.
Was you had mentioned previously.
What I was alluding to is the fact that I never told any of my family members. Well, I always had to say a way I kind of calm myself before the match because there's a lot of nervous energy and they're doing the announcements of this person in that corner, who's in red, who's in blue. And I just tend to simply I would always just glance out into the crowd. Just would look out, walk back and forth, work on my deep breathing, stuff like this. Well, I happened to glance out the crowd and my father stood up.
Wow.
So I'm like going, oh my God, my dad is here.
Yeah.
I am not going to lose in front of my father.
Yeah. What was that feeling like, seeing your dad that just previously you had explained to him for the first time, like, hey, I'm doing this, and now he's in the stands.
Yeah, no, I get it. Just, I get it. I couldn't think about that other the fact that it's like, it kind of blew me away. He's here. I did have a game plan going into this event.
Yeah.
And it was, it was kind of crappy the way some of the things went down because the UFC was in court just earlier that day.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to ban this show from taking place. And when they were in court, there were like all these different concessions.
Yeah, they called it similar to chicken fighing.
That were being made. And then once, they got out of the court, I think, around that 4 o'clock that day. And, the show was at night. So all the athletes are in the Cobo Hall Arena, and we have our own little setup type of locker room type areas. Then you have Big John McCarthy that's walking from locker room area to locker room area, telling the athletes what's going down tonight on the rules.
Yeah.
I've always been a curious George. I ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
So as John is going through the stuff like this, he goes, if you should violate the rules, something like this, he said, you will be warned. And I'm like going, well, John, how many warnings do you get before if there's any kind of like penalty? He goes, Severn, he goes, you will be warned.
Yeah.
He goes, I'm like going, okie dokie. So I always had a tendency of always watching the first match or two to find out how are the referees calling things.
Right.
I always tell people that there are two types of people in this world. There are those that simply let life happen to them, and there's other people that actually have some kind of a game plan, and they try to make life happen for them. And I watched the first couple of matches. In the very first match, you weren't supposed to be allowed to do headbutts.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was Cal Worsham was out in this match, and he does a headbutt. And I go, Big John goes, warning, headbutt, warning, headbutt, warning. I'm thinking,
how many more do you get?
How many more warnings I go? I say, Big John's going to get tired of just saying warning. But, I'm thinking, well, this looks like it's going to be carte blanche here tonight. Yeah. And again, I watched. Yeah, even as my match is getting closer, I'm starting to warm up, stuff like this. They got the monitors back. I'm able to keep watching what's happening.
Yeah.
And so let's just say that the show went on the way a normal UFC show would go on. But in my back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, I don't think the UFC is going to be invited back to Michigan anytime soon here now.
It's crazy to see the progress of the sport since.
It's a multi-million dollar. The UFC is worth
billions,
in excess of $1 billion. Yes,
yeah.
It's sold for just a crazy amount.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Dana and how he's ran the organization?
Well, there's a lot of people that there are sometimes that Dana speaks a little too quickly. Like, I remember when he said there will never be women in, and I'm making as those words are rolling off his lips, I go, don't ever. I said that's what they thought about boxing.
Right.
The inevitability, women will be there.
Yeah.
I think it was Title IX came out in the mid '80s. Mm-hmm. For every male sport, there's a female counter sport that has been allowed to it. So a lot of you, and that's on the collegiate type basis.
Yeah.
So
other than him watching his words, though, when you think about how technically wrong he was, because Ronda Rousey, one of the biggest UFC superstars of all time,
armbar champion.
Yeah, armbar champion, and a specialist at it too.
Yes.
Just an insane amount of talent that it's mind-boggling.
But if you look at, she grew up in an environment. Her mother was a judogian from way back, and from different feedback I got from other people that Mama was pretty darn good in her heyday as well. Yeah. So there was a good lineage she came from.
But when you look at White's history of how, I know a lot of MMA fans want to, for lack of better words, shit on his name. They really do. And you see the blogs that come out and this and that. The man's running it through a pandemic right now. Yeah. He built it from this to this when the Fertitta brothers took over, and they got the Spike TV deal and the Ultimate Fighter and everything. What are your opinions and thoughts on how things are, from back in the day when he started helping, be the main promoter and the manager to now?
Well, obviously he's had lots of obstacles, and you have to make decisions. Right or wrong, you have to make decisions. So, he's made decisions, and some of them have come back to bite him, and some of them have worked out really well for him. you got to be decisive and you have to move forward.
Yeah.
And, even going through this pandemic, knowing that he cannot be shut down, he may not be able to run the show here in the United States. He might have to go to a different country.
Yeah.
But by God, the show goes on.
It's crazy when you look at Abu Dhabi and Fight Island. I mean, it's something that the NFL didn't do, the NBA didn't do. I mean, when you look at premier sports, there was a time where there wasn't NFL, there wasn't NBA. It was just UFC fights on ESPN. And to me, as an MMA fan, it was a beautiful thing. It was like, let's bring more fans into this world. Did you see them pulling off successful events? I mean, when I look at it, I see, sure, there was a couple COVID cases here and there. But when you look at the roster and how many more fights are happening now because of it, I say it's a success.
Well, it was a success. First off, the fact is he was able to pull off shows.
Yeah.
To me, you can run an event in the most remote corner of the world now, as long as you can somehow telecast it through pay-per-view or something like that back to different places.
Right.
The cell phone. I always hold up the cell phone because as I talk to a lot of trying to motivational type speaking, I hold the cell phone all the time. I go, what is this? And people are like, what's the cell phone? I go, what else is it? What other functions could you do? And they're like, well, it's a computer. It's this. I go, you are holding the world in your hands.
You really are. Yeah.
That's why I tell people anymore. I go, if you want a business, that business better somehow get on that cell phone.
Yeah.
Or some type of advertisement or something like that, because everybody has a cell phone, even people that don't need cell phones, like homeless people.
Yeah. Well, and you look at it too. I mean, you can watch all of the pay-per-views on your phone.
Yes.
You can look at the stats on your phone as the fight's happening.
How many times? I mean, you could have people sitting there watching a UFC pay-per-view, streaming it.
Yeah.
Right from their cell phone to their friends who are not at the show.
That is true, too. And that has been a big issue.
Yes.
I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well. As far as, in the land of subscription services with the ESPN Plus deal and the UFC partnering up with that. And then you also have these streaming deals to where, obviously the UFC gets the pay-per-view dollars and they distribute them, to the fighters and, and everything like that. But what are your thoughts on, like, the Buffalo Wild Wings parties to where there's, 100 people inside of a B-dubs? And obviously that's a sponsorship with the UFC. But what are your thoughts on the pay-per-view model? Because back in your day, there was a pay-per-view model.
Well, the pay-per-view model, I mean, the pay-per-view model originally was only in large metropolitan areas.
Right.
So if you were in a state like Michigan, you might be running somewhere down in the Detroit area, maybe something get up in the Flint area, over in Grand Rapids. Only in major cities would there have been a location you could go to actually watch this in, maybe like a big old theater room or something like that, but you could watch it on a big screen or something of that nature. Whereas now, you can watch it, just like you said, off of your cell phone.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's crazy. When you look back at your 100-plus fights, is there any fight that sticks out to you that you would love to run back? Whether it's a win or a loss, maybe you wanted to extra beat the hell out of the guy to get another victory on him. But if you were to look back at your entire career, is there one that sticks out?
Yeah, no, there's I don't think really. Well, no. Okay, yes, the Royce Gracie fight. Mm-hmm. I always tell because it's come up in different interviews, because whoever the person that was doing the interviewing, they were just they would not let it go, and I go, you don't know me. This is what I tell them. I go, you don't know me. You don't know my mindset. You don't know what I'm capable really of doing. I said, had I done, because I hold a couple different records in just the UFC. And when you look at, I'm the only Triple Crown champion ever in the UFC's no holds barred era. For winning one of their normal 8-man tournaments, for winning one of their super bouts when they were starting to do the super bouts, but then also winning the ultimate when they brought back various champions and or runner-ups, and that was the biggest prize money that they put out at the time. But they've done away with that. There was it was supposed to be something that was going to go on more and more, but things happened and they changed. So I tell people that if I would have done what I know I'm capable of doing, if I would have destroyed a Royce Gracie, would there be a UFC today? And
that is very true.
But always I bring that because to give you the backstory is, the creator of the UFC is Art Davie.
Yeah.
He brought in Rorion Gracie as his partner, as the matchmaker. So I always tell people that the Gracies used the UFC to promote Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, because if you go back and look at any of those early tournaments, it was never Royce Gracie beats. It was always Gracie Jiu-Jitsu beats Taekwondo.
Yeah, the brand.
Gracie Jiu-Jitsu beats Karate. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu beats.
Right.
And I go, now you look at today, as I said, top 10 men per weight class. 8 or 9 of them are wrestlers.
Yeah.
You'll have one jiu-jitsu guy in there, no strikers.
Right.
And always, again, that's just a fact, a stat.
And when you look at fighters even like Usman, and you look at Khabib, I mean, they do have the striking abilities, but they're so well-rounded that they can always rely. Even Justin Gaethje, who's set to fight Khabib in a couple weeks, I really want to watch that fight. Well, hey, listen, we're gonna have a watch party here. I would love to have you up here, but we could talk about that off the podcast. But Gaethje and Khabib, that's a wrestler's dream fight.
Yep.
But Gaethje hasn't used any of his wrestling. His past 4 fights have been all knockouts. He beat Tony Ferguson, who was on a 12-fight win streak. So it's like when you have that in your back drawer to pull out in case you need. That's what you were saying earlier. Is that in order to be a mixed martial artist back in the day, it was you could be a dominant striker, but that's only going to get you so far. Now it's a requirement to have that well-rounded blend.
Well, if you look at like a Chuck Liddell, the Iceman, Chuck Liddell,
that overhand right.
He had. Well, the ironic part is, he had almost as many knockouts as being knocked out. Because he kind of lived by the sword, he died by the sword.
And that's like my personal favorite fighter of all time is Wanderlei Silva. Because, I mean, when that bell rings, even from the Pride days to the UFC days, it was on. His fight against Brian Stann was like, it's just insane, but I like a striker, and that's why I have so much respect for you, because you had the wrestling background, but you can knock people out. You've knocked people out.
Not really. I mean,
but when you were
I was more wicked with knees and things of that nature.
Right,
knees and elbows, I was good with that.
Being a dominant striker is what I'm saying. When you, and we'll end the Hoist conversation on this, were you thinking at the time, if I destroy this man, it is the end of the UFC, so I'll go easy on him?
No. That wasn't none of those thoughts crossed my mind at that point. At the time, I just tell people that, how do I even put this in words here right now? It's always hard, because I said to set the stage, being an amateur wrestler for 30-some years, and not being able to strike. And even, I always tell people, go back and watch a match. You'll never see any direct blows down. It was always like a little peripheral. Because at the point where I thought, I'm going to have to hit this guy, I'm like, well, maybe I'll do a little roundhouse over here, a little punch right there. Because I had him down on the ground. I had him where I wanted him.
Yeah.
But you got to realize, what I thought might work on him was not working.
Yeah.
It worked on Al Snow and my other couple of professional wrestling proteges right there, but that 5-day, an hour and a half training camp wasn't really all that intense.
Yeah.
But that's why, again, I go tell people that in UFC 5, I took out 32 days of my life. I left my family back in Coldwater. I went out to Arizona. I stayed by myself. I lived like an animal. I trained like an animal.
Yeah.
And thus Jim Brown gave me an animal's name, the Beast.
Is there any fighter that you see now in the organization that reminds you of yourself?
I mean, there's any of the grapplers that step out there, they're all are basically kind of a reminder of where I came from. The sport overall has evolved.
Yeah.
Today, you have strikers that can grapple with some of the best of the grapplers. And you got some of the grapplers that can strike with the best of strikers, so you have a more complete, well-rounded athlete.
Yeah.
That's what I look at today.
My network programmer had a question for you, and
shoot away.
I thought it was an interesting one. Has there ever been a situation where maybe, and I don't know if you're much of a drinker or not. I mean, obviously now
it doesn't mix well with the pills I'm on.
Yeah, but when you think back in the day, was there ever a moment where you were sitting at the bar and someone wanted to start something with you and they didn't realize that maybe they were messing with the wrong guy?
Well, what I did was I used to do a lot of appearances at sports bars, but they would be a little bit later in the evening.
Oh.
And so I had to learn, okay, not exactly a good idea, because if you wait a little bit later in the evening, maybe a few of those patrons have been sitting around and partaking of a little bit too many libations there, to where they're a little bit bolder. Because I have had guys come up to like going, I thought you'd be bigger. Really.
Someone has actually said that.
Oh, they said, I thought you'd be bigger. You don't look that tough. Literally, they say that kind of stuff. Now, I use humor just to kind of lighten up the mood, stuff like that. But on a couple occasions, I pulled out one of my business cards, and I wrote a phone number, and I slid it over to the individual. And they're like, well, what's that? I go, that's the number to the UFC. I said, I have never fought for free. I don't wish to start any bad habits now. I said, but what you're going to like is there's a referee.
Yeah.
And he will pull me off of you when you start screaming, because if this goes down here and now, there is no referee.
Yeah.
There is no rules here right now.
Yeah.
I mean, but that only happened a couple times where I was at that point of, I'm ready to go.
Right.
And it's not going to be nice what's about to happen right there, because I'm also big about weaponry.
Yeah.
So using all kinds of obstacles around you. I mean, I always tell people, look at what some of the things I did in the octagon cage. Nobody did some of the things I did in the octagon cage, where I actually used the cage.
Yeah.
I used the cage, and do you remember? I don't know if you ever played with Play-Doh as a kid.
Yeah.
But the Play-Doh pressing, squeeze it through, and make a thing. Well, I had one of my opponents down on the ground, and I grabbed the chain link fence, and I had my head up against the side of his face, and I was trying to do like the Play-Doh press, trying to squeeze his head right through. The guy is screaming and tapping on out. And even the referee looked at me all dumbfounded.
Yeah.
And because I think I was right next to where the commentators, they were dumbfounded. My opponent stands on up. He's got chain link fence, embedded into the side of his face. And they're like going, they've never seen somebody do that. But I always told them that I'm an educated athlete. I always go back to like a couple of the bragging points, is that my 4 brothers and I, all 5 Severn males, went to college on full athletic scholarships in the sport of wrestling.
Right.
Now, wrestling falls in the same category as gymnastics and swimming. There is no true profession to go on to, like football, basketball, baseball. You got true professional levels to go on to. Wrestling doesn't, like I said, gymnastics, stuff like that. So when you leave college, you actually have to have tangible skills. All right. Can't rely upon, shooting hoops or, putting the pigskin into the end zone, stuff like that. And my 3 sisters went to college on basically full academic scholarships. So I always tell people I'm a jock with a brain, and that's a scary cat.
And strong genes, too, clearly.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Growing up on a farm and having good stock that we came from, you bet.
Yeah. Now, when you look at the roster and the way things are and how everything is set up now in the UFC, and you look at your career back in the day, who do you remember hitting you the hardest?
Again, that's easy. I always tell people that Mark Coleman hit me the hardest ever, because I remember when he hit me, I felt like the song, and I'm like going, okay,
it's like a cartoon.
I see 3 of it right now. Go for the guy in the middle,
and that was for the championship belt.
Yeah,
that was for the belt. Yeah.
So again, but the hard part was that he was also another wrestler. So he was going to have certain attributes that were going to probably cancel out my attributes. So now we're going to go on secondary skills, striking, and Danny Boy kind of sucks at the striking. Yeah.
So, before we get out of here, I want to do a couple of hot takes. So I'm going to ask you about some current UFC news, and I want to get your opinion on it. Jon Jones. Go ahead.
But might embarrass me a little bit on this one, because
no, you're good. It's common knowledge. So Jon Jones recently admitted that the reason why, a number of years ago, he actually hit under the octagon.
I just want to say that Jon Jones was one of the most incredibly gifted athletes.
Yeah.
And yet he has pissed away so much of his career, because so gifted of what he could have done, and probably still can do, if he just gets squared away.
What do you think about the recent news? He recently put a tweet out that said that the reason why he was hiding from the Nevada Athletic Commission underneath the gym octagon at the time, or gym ring, wasn't because of steroids, but it was because he smoked a blunt recently with weed in it. I can't say it with a straight face, but that was a recent tweet that he put out. What are your thoughts on Jon? Obviously, he is an incredible athlete.
Yeah. I'll just say kudos on an aspect of an athletic attributes, phenomenal. Weak-minded and being influenced in other aspects. I mean, being involved in say accidents and then running from the scene and things that there's certain things you just don't do. Stand there, man up, face up, and move along. I mean, everybody makes mistakes in life. Everybody does. It's just
do you think
how to handle
it's a problem when it's over and over and over again? Like listen, Jon's is one of the most dominant UFC athletes of all time, but the criminal cases and the PED accusations and everything, you have to take that into effect when you're talking about the UFC GOATs, the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Would you put him up there as one of the greatest of all time?
As I said, an incredible athlete. I mean, when you look at what he has done in a lot of his matches, he should be up there as someone that is known for something. But there's a strength and a weakness in everybody.
Yeah.
And he just had that Achilles heel that stopped him from really being the GOAT.
Okay, a couple more hot take questions. Khabib Nurmagomedov, obviously fighting Justin Gaethje at the end of October. Do you see him retiring undefeated?
Khabib?
Yeah.
Okay, no, I will basically be betting the farm on Gaethje that night.
That's why you're the man. Why you're the man. People, I'm planning on writing an article about this, but people underestimate Justin Gaethje. He is a well-rounded striker. He's proved that. 4 KOs in his past 4 fights. But he has the wrestling background that no one has faced Khabib like Justin Gaethje.
Yeah.
Do you think that he'll be the one to take away
I've
the
had a
USAC?
one-on-one conversation with Gaethje.
Yeah.
And he just says that he doesn't want to use the wrestler because he's there to put on an exciting match.
And he does.
And then I told him, I understand that. Now, one of the very first times I was watching a Justin Gaethje match, I was up in the northern part of Arizona, I think, at the time, and I happened to be. We did. I was doing something with the UFC. Where are they at now?
Oh, okay,
Okay, so I was doing a segment
the
there.
docuseries.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I was doing something because I was working with the corrections, and I was showing them that I do things with the first responders, so law enforcement, corrections, air marshal, border patrol, military. So there's a prison up there. So I was going in and we were showing some stuff about cell extractions and things of that nature. So it happened to be in the same hometown as Justin Gaethje.
Yeah.
And so we went to this auditorium, and Justin wasn't there, but all of his, school teachers and the school, they were all in there, and that was great. But he was on the screen, so you got the smart TVs, all that.
Yeah.
He's on there, and so we're interacting. And I also had his parents, his mother, his father were there, and a couple other siblings.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so I'm talking to him, and I'm really, for the first time ever, watching a couple of his clips. And when everything was done, I pulled Dad off to the side.
Yeah.
And I said, Pops, send me your son. Your son is eating way too many punches. He knows no other direction than forward.
Right.
But, oh, what a price he is paying by going forward, because he eats punch after punch after punch. Some will say, yeah, he's got a strong chin. Well, a lot of people have had a strong chin in the past.
Right.
And sooner or later,
it gets cracked.
If you keep chiseling at that chin, it will crack, it will break. No one has just hit it on the button there yet. Do I want to see it? No, I don't want to see that. I would like to see Justin continue to do, but I kidly would say stuff like, you need to tell your boy, instead of just forward and backward, there's this thing called lateral. That means side to side.
And I think Trevor Whitman helped him with that greatly. I mean, one of the greatest coaches in MMA history got him to where he's at now. When you watch his fight against Tony Ferguson, I honestly was doubtful of Gaethje at the time because Ferguson has the elbows. He's got the submission skills. He's got so many crazy unorthodox moves, but Justin just hung tough, and he got in there and he got it done. And by the 5th round, it's like this fight has to end.
Yeah, I have yet to see that match.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it's an incredible one. So one last question when it comes to the hot takes. Do you ever see Floyd Mayweather making a debut in the octagon?
You didn't even have to finish it. No.
There's not enough money in the world.
His wheelhouse is boxing.
Right.
He's a smart man. He's dominant force in the world of boxing. He had Conor McGregor there in a boxing match there as well. And the reality is, when you go back and look at that, and a lot of people thought that McGregor was getting the better of him. There was only a point where, when Mayweather finally shifted into a whole different gear, there was never even, it was not a contest.
He held him off for rounds.
Yeah.
He held him off for rounds and waited to pick his shots, and he knew that McGregor was going to spend himself out. And I would like to see. Would you like to see a rematch between those two, or do you think it's pretty much well determined that Mayweather would win again?
Yeah, I would. Again, if I was going to be betting, I'd be betting the farm on Mayweather.
Yeah.
Again, boxing, MMA is a whole different animal. The striker. If there's an MMA match between the two, I'd pick Conor McGregor then.
Yeah,
because now you have other skill sets that you could utilize in there.
You got the legs, that alone.
Yeah,
he's had some pretty great leg kicks.
But you just look at boxing in general, boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, any of those the standing striking type arts, the referee. Each time that if you and I were doing a boxing match and I clinched it, the referee would like, oh, no. They'll separate us.
Yeah.
Fellas, you're not allowed to clinch.
Yeah.
But again, that's where I said I was always good about closing the distance and getting to clinches, getting to takedowns, or just jamming my opponent up against that cage wall to where I simply know that once I did one of those three things, I neutralized 90+% of your arsenal.
Yeah.
Kind of tough to strike somebody when they're looking down upon you in a mount position. Well,
and I think that's why you look at fighters like Tito Ortiz, why he was so dominant. If he gets on top of you, it's over. And Khabib's the same way. Yep. You look at the ground and pound strikes, and it all goes back to being a phenomenal mixed martial artist.
Again, I'll throw the kudos there. Mark Coleman is actually the gentleman who coined the phrase ground and pound. He goes, I'm just going to take you down, and I'm going to ground you down, just beat you down at that point in time. So he coined the phrase ground and pound.
If people want to keep up with what you have going on, obviously, with the country opening back up, you're going to be much more busier in the next couple months. Where can they find you on the socials and all that?
Right now, simply I'll just say dansevern.com. If you go to dansevern.com, all my social media, the Facebook and Twitter and things like that are all right there. So they click on, and they can see some interesting articles from the past and all kinds of stuff.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough.
Rest assured that the Beast, even though I'm moving away from the competition aspect, I still think there might be one or two things that might be done as something kind of interesting. But
you're leaving us on a cliffhanger.
Will I ever truly retire? No. As you can tell, I still have a plan on hand. I'm still making things happen. There's a lot more. I will still be impacting the world in a lot of different ways, most all of which will be in a very positive type manner.
Yeah, and that's what's important. I mean, when you look at the most brutal sport on planet Earth, it's good to have some positivity here and there. Yeah. Dan,
I think so.
The Beast Severn, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the opportunity once again to bring you to the new studios, and you're always welcome anytime. Thank you so much.
Boy, I think we'll do another maybe where is he at now? Maybe in another year or two we do something like that to see how things are progressing for the Beast.
That would be a beautiful thing. Thank you so much for your time.
Yep.